Thank you for attending this webinar today in our QuickBooks Simplified series. We are on session number 2 out of 3, and I am your moderator, Jenny Alton from the New York Small Business Development Center Central Office, and I am so pleased to welcome back Christy Dudgeon, President of SBC Consulting, as your presenter and QuickBooks guru for the day. So this webinar is brought to you by the NYSBDC. We are a U.S. Small Business Administration resource partner with regional centers at higher education institutions and outreach offices at other locations across New York State. Our free advising, education, research, and advocacy services are made possible by funding from the SBA, New York State, and our host campuses. Now, a few items of housekeeping before we continue. So attendees are muted and will not be on camera today. We are recording, and so we will be able to send you a link to where you can view the recording as well as access resources from today's session. And that will come to you in a follow-up email. And so we invite you to drop your questions in the Q&A or chat as we go along. I will be monitoring those, and Christy will be answering questions throughout the presentation as much as possible, as much as time allows. We have a lot of material to get through today, so we will answer as many questions as we can, but we very much appreciate your questions. You can look for the chat and Q&A features at the bottom of your Zoom window. And I also want to mention that closed captioning is enabled today for anyone who needs that service. All right. That takes care of my housekeeping, and I will now turn the time over to Christy.
Thank you very much, Jenny. I am going to share my screen now. The first thing we are going to do today is we are just going to talk about what we're going to cover today so that you can anticipate what it is that we're going to discuss, as well as then go over any questions that anybody has remaining from class 1. There was a ton of material that we covered. I know a lot of you were bouncing questions in LinkedIn as well. And we will try to cover those this morning as well. We are going to hit categorizing pretty significantly as part of today's training, as well as step-by-step and demonstrations. So if you have very specific questions about categorization and some of those items that we discussed, you might want to hold those until we get to that section, because I will be covering that as we go along. All right, I'm going to attempt to get my screen to share again. Let's do this. Here we go. All right. So questions from class 1, as I mentioned, we are going to cover those, as well as the 5 steps to implementing QuickBooks. What I mean by that is the chart of accounts, which we discussed very heavily in class 1, as well as connecting your bank accounts, categorizing, reconciling, and reports. That's a ton of information. Typically, when we're doing one-on-one technical assistance training, as far as our team, this might be an actual 5-meeting series. We are going to cover that in one day. QuickBooks does call this method in particular that I'm going to teach you today the fastest, quickest way to get to your financial reports. In their opinion, I'm not saying that that's absolutely correct. I consider that to be the reactive way of accounting, but you'll see it at least here. This is where a lot of businesses will start, just so that they can get things organized and start to move into using QuickBooks and producing those financial reports. Then we're going to discuss what I mean by reactive versus proactive. You'll hear me reference both of those terms a lot today. And next class, then, we're going to talk more about the proactive side of things, or those other features that maybe you really need as part of your business that you just can't get from capturing transactions that are just coming into the bank feed. So let's start off then with class 1 homework discussion questions. You guys can use the Q&A. I will capture those as I'm looking and answer those directly. I will repeat the question, whomever has it, as well as answer it or try to address it. So your homework for class 1, if you watch the video and you set up QuickBooks, first of all, you can tell me, did anybody actually set up QuickBooks on their own? As well as, did you do homework in either the test site, which is Craig's Landscaping, or within your own, as far as cleaning up the chart of accounts and setting up your logo or that specific business information. That was the information there. So I will let you guys go ahead and ask those questions here for a second before we dive into the quickest, fastest way to get to your financial reports.
Okay, so chat and Q&A are open. And Natalie, I know that you were having an issue being able to see the screen. Can some of our other attendees tell me if you are seeing Christie's shared screen? If you could drop that in the chat, we'd appreciate knowing if we have a systemic problem here or a specific user. Okay, great.
Oh,
Great.
looks
Okay,
like we're
so
good.
Natalie, I think other people are seeing the screen, so I will try to give you a tip or two here through text. And okay, great. So go ahead and drop questions, everyone. Thank you for letting us know that you can indeed see the screen.
Yeah, Natalie, this looks like this might be a you specific issue just from the responses that we just received. Um, I'm not sure exactly how to tell you to to help with that. It might just be the you might have a second screen, a second monitor maybe that is preventing you, or that block of the actual screen is somewhere else. I tend to have that problem a lot, so I always mention that one. It will pop up somewhere or behind the faces maybe, and you can't necessarily see it right off. So we've got a couple people in the chat that have set up QuickBooks. One is set up QuickBooks, one is set up Wave. Yes, Wave is one of those alternatives, right? Definitely to QuickBooks. Very similar terminology there with Wave. Little less flexibility just from a user standpoint, doesn't quite grow to the extent that you can with QuickBooks, but it is a great first step in maintaining your finances, especially from a software standpoint. So good to see that, Ebony, that you were using that. It looks like we had some issue downloading a logo. Other than that, any questions from class one? It doesn't look like anything specific. That was pretty easy homework. The biggest part of class one was just making sure that you were able to navigate over to your chart of accounts, as well as understanding what to inactivate maybe and how to inactivate it. So we are going to start from that standpoint then. Because the very first thing that we're talking about today is the chart of accounts. And I want to go into the account that I set up as a test account specifically. The reason that I did that is sometimes we'll use the test account that is that Craig's Landscaping. It has a ton of things that are incorrect in it and a lot of cleanup to do. And it sometimes can be hard to tell what you should actually be doing, right? If you were setting up your new account, or maybe what that might look like. So I'm going to switch my screen over to the New York SBDC test account that I set up for this class specifically. And I'm just going to go navigate over to the chart of accounts and show you that inactivation again. I did not specifically on my own account inactivate the income or expenses, so I'll do just a little bit of that for you as a demo today. And you can certainly ask questions in the chat or the Q&A as I go through this to make sure that you are familiar with what it is that I'm doing. For those of you using Wave or any of the other accounts, such as Zero, this is a similar process, but obviously it's a little bit different terminology, a little bit different functionality. So you should be able to see my screen now. And this is that test account that I set up for SBDC, so you could see what it looks like clean just as soon as you log in. So if I'm navigating to the chart of accounts, you'll remember that I said there's a couple different ways that you can get there. One of the best is to just get into the habit of navigating through accounting, just because you're going to be utilizing that most often when you are working in bank transactions or any kind of integrated transactions. And you'll see all of these here at the top. We're going to talk about them today, but we can go to the chart of accounts. I'm going to open up that chart of accounts. It's interesting. It knows I'm sharing my screen, so it's hiding a lot of things from you guys, which is fun. It's going to make it a little bit more difficult. It's not like I have actual financial information in here that I'm showing you. However, this is the chart of accounts. You might remember that I mentioned something about there's always pop-ups when you are dealing with QuickBooks. They usually come right here at the top of the screen. They drive me crazy because they ultimately just push things down or push things out of the way. The other thing we can do is we can close this taskbar if we want to. That is keeping us in track with our setup. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close this because it brings everything back up and I can see things much easier. Depending on the size of screen that you're working on, I'm often on a little laptop, and that makes it really difficult because it just pushes everything down on my laptop. But I already cleaned up the balance sheet items such as the um, assets, liabilities, and equity in the video that I sent you guys, but I haven't done the income and expenses. Now, if you already have a QuickBooks account and it's already been in use, or any other chart of accounts for that matter, one of the things that you will see in QuickBooks specifically is that if I were to go into these accounts, they've already been in use, right? And I start inactivating things, this is going to cause problems potentially. And that would be that I might have already utilized one of these accounts, being that I've already categorized the transactions to them. And if I inactivate them, that doesn't delete the account, it doesn't take it away. And when I'm down in income and expenses, it's especially problematic because if you remember, I said income and expenses are different from the assets, liabilities, and equity. Assets, liabilities, and equity all have a value that's associated with them. And we can see that right here under QuickBooks Balance. So we've got these $0. So I have visibility when I'm looking at the screen to say, okay, these are all $0. They're okay. None of them actually have a transaction to them. However, when I get down into income and expenses, you notice those go away because there is no actual value associated with them. So I can do one of two things before I go through this. And this is specifically if you've already been using QuickBooks and you've already categorized things to them. If it's brand new like this one, I can do this pretty confidently without issue. However, I might want to click this either run report button over here to the right. If I click run report, what it's going to do is it's going to create a report that's going to show me all of these transactions. And so far, it's going to say no to this or that there are no transactions that are associated with it. If it pops up, here we go. But one thing you do want to be aware of or be concerned with is that the default report period up here at the top left is only going to be 90 days. And so if I've been utilizing QuickBooks for years, I want to do this drop down, scroll all the way to the top and just say all dates. And when I say all dates, then I know that it's going to show me if there's ever anything in the last however many years that might be that are actually associated with this account. Once I see that there are none, I can choose this path up here at the top that says back to chart of accounts so I don't have to navigate all the way around. Once I get back to my chart of accounts, I can come over here to the right because I'm not going to do billable expense income to my clients. And I'm just going to do this drop down to say make inactive. And it does give you a warning, which most people don't read, but it says this will complete any pending transactions associated. Existing transactions won't change or become inactive. This is a common error. People say, oh, I don't have this account anymore. I don't need this account anymore. So they just inactivate it thinking that it's going to take all those transactions away, and it does not. It will show up then on all your financial reports with this little parentheses if it has transactions associated with it that says deleted. Obviously, big error. So the only way to fix that is to come back in here and move all of those transactions by recategorizing them or leave it active. You're only going to see it if it is a balance sheet account because balance sheets are over a period of time. And so if I had a balance on an account in 2012, yet that balance still remains today, and I pull my balance sheet as of today, it will still show up there. However, if I pull a profit and loss for this year, which is between a period of time, then I'm not going to see it because those transactions were from 2012. So really, it does depend on what type of account it is and how much cleanup you have to do. But that is the process of deactivating or inactivating these excessive chart of accounts items that you might have. And this is not just for QuickBooks, this is any other accounting software that you might be using. So I'm probably going to give a refund to a customer at some point in time. Sales, services, you can see they add multiple things. I'm a service-based company, or what I'm going to call today, so I don't need one that's just basic sales. I'm just going to use services. So I'm going to make this inactive. It's going to take it away. Any of these words with the un in front of them, I don't know why QuickBooks has given me uncategorized income and uncategorized income dash one. It's given me two of them. However, it most likely is not going to let me take either one of these away because it will say these are required accounts. Oh, nope, look at that. It's going to do it for me. However, if I try to do this one, it might give me the warning that, or it's going to make me a liar. Here we go. So this is the warning that I get when QuickBooks doesn't allow you to deactivate, and that's because it's a default account with the chart of accounts. So it just starts with un. And then I get this warning up at the top that I can't do it, and that's fine. Then I've got my cost of goods sold. As I mentioned in the video, depending on what your cost of goods sold is, you might not have direct subcontractor expenses and you might not need the direct supply of the materials. You might. These are sub accounts of the parent. You might just need the cost of goods sold line. You might have more sub accounts than just those two, and certainly adding those in there. Advertising and marketing is pretty standard. If I have rent, I definitely want that. Commissions and fees, I'm not really a commission-based business, so I say, nope, I don't need that one. I don't have contract labor that I'm paying for that isn't a direct expense, so I might scrutinize that account and say, oh, this is where I could make an error and accidentally use the indirect one as opposed to the direct one. And so I want to save myself some time and energy. Take that away. Employee benefits, right now I don't have any employees, so I can take that whole entire thing away, and I can take the parent and the children away just by taking the parent away. It will take everything underneath of it. If I try to do the parent and the children at the same time, it's going to give me an error for that. Contributions to charities, sure. Entertainment with clients, okay. Equipment rental, don't really need that one in my line of work. These are all questions you're going to ask yourself, whether or not you need to do this or should have this. Insurance for sure, interest expense, absolutely. Meals, you'll notice there's two different types of meals in here, and this is pretty important. So we have meals with clients or we have travel meals. And this is because from an IRS standpoint, one can be 100% deductible and one might only be 50% deductible. So it's probably a good idea to have both of those. Office expense for sure. Other business expense, I'm going to have bank and credit card fees. This could also be the same thing as far as a credit card fee could be considered interest expense. That's where you might ask that question if it's a naming thing that makes sense to you. I don't have employees at this time, so I'm going to get rid of my payroll expenses. For professional services, I usually don't break out accounting and legal into two different things because professional services can cover so many things. So I might just say accounting and legal fees. I don't need either one of those. I'm just going to call everything professional services. And so I'm going to make that inactive. Certainly, if you need to know from your business standpoint the difference between what you're paying your accountant versus what you're paying your attorney, you might want to break those out. There are other ways to also differentiate that. Taxes and licenses, no payroll taxes and no property taxes here in my world. So I'm going to take those away. Travel, I am going to keep. Uncategorized, I have to keep. Utilities, I'm going to keep. Credit card rewards, this is a pretty common thing, and you'll notice it comes in under other income, so I might want to keep that. Insurance claims, I'm probably not going to keep. Interest income, you might have an interest-bearing account, savings account, money market account, investments accounts, things like that. It would be important to keep that one if you do have that one. Amortization expenses, I don't have that right now. Depreciation, I will because I'm going to add some fixed assets. You guys will see that in a little bit. Home office, my home office expenses are purely home office, and that's going to be on my personal taxes. That has no bearing on my business taxes. These are one of those things that I don't even want to show up on my business expenses. Vehicle expense, same thing. I'm using my personal vehicles, so I'm going to get rid of the vehicle expenses. Those are just some common things that I have questions on, the businesses that I've worked with. So we're going to take that away and we're going to make those inactive.
Christy, could we answer a
Yes,
question really quick? How
sure.
hard is it to reactivate these if
It
you
is
end
so
up
simple, and
needing it
that's
later
actually
on?
yeah, and that's actually what I'm going to show you right now.
Great.
So that is a great question, well timed. One thing I did want to point out, if you guys remember in the video, I think I started with 100 and some accounts. I don't remember exactly what it was. I'm now narrowed it down to 38. And so one of the methods to the madness with this is twofold. Um, it's a lot easier to understand your chart of accounts the less that you have, as well as you will do a lot of scrolling. We are a scroll society. I'm going to show you how to not necessarily get yourself into the scrolling habit when you're doing categorizing, although it's very common. Everybody immediately starts scrolling around on the screen. To bring those back, though, we go to the little gear. If you remember, I talk a lot about the big gear, which is at the top, which ironically, on my screen, this one actually looks bigger. But the little gear, you will find this setting in almost every screen that you're in, and it's specific to the actual screen that you're in. So this is the setting for this as opposed to the top one, which is high level. And if I click that little guy, I can find this box under other that says include inactive. And if I check that box, what it does is it will give me everything, and you'll notice those little deleteds beside them. And so that's one way of knowing all of these have been taken away, as well as over here to the right, it says make active. So if I come back down here to these expenses and I say, oh, wait, now I have employees, right? So my payroll expenses do exist. All I have to do is click make active, and it's going to remove that little deleted. It's going to bring it back, and I can utilize it again in the future. But for this moment, I'm going to go back over to my payroll as soon as I find it, and I'm going to take it away, which I can then do the exact same process. I don't have to change the screen. I don't have to uncheck that box, and I can make it inactive. So if you really want to see what was active versus inactive all the time, you could just keep that box checked. But it is much easier if you come back up here and uncheck that little box once you're done, and it will take some of these things away then, make it much simpler to see. So that is a very cleaned up, very tight, very small chart of accounts. And we're going to then flip into the next part if we don't have any other questions. Gabe asked a question about creating our own specific accounts, and absolutely, I'm going to show you how to do that because that's going to be part of the categorizing. I'll show you how to do it when you're in the process of it, but right now I'll show you on the screen as well because there are two ways to do that. One, when you are specifically in there, right? And they're also up here at the top. You can click New Account in the top right-hand corner. And when you click New Account, one thing that you need to be very aware of, because I see this happen a lot, is that you have to change the account type and the detail type. And so you have to know what all three of those are in order to do this correctly. So we're going to name it. For this one in particular, I'm going to call this capital improvements because I'm going to be doing some capital improvements as part of my bank feed. And then I change my account type. If you forget to change your account type, what it does is it forces it into the top one, which is bank. And so I will see a lot of people with expenses that are called bank accounts. And so the problem with that is, right, is that showing up on the wrong report, and you would never have a profit and loss that's truly showing the balance of those balances correctly, or the having those expenses correctly outlined. So for this one in particular, because it is capital improvements, this is going to be called a fixed asset. So I need to make sure I choose that right account type. That's why I spent an hour going over what those different account types are, right? So those are our big five. Those are either our assets, liabilities, equity, income, or expenses. And then our detail type, the system is then going to default to the detail types that you can then choose for whichever account type that you chose. And so that detail type drop down, it's not accumulated amortization for this, but I said it's going to be a fixed asset. For this, it's going to be a fixed asset other. Um, other tools and equipment just because there is not an option there. So if you saw the fixed assets, I could choose computers, copiers, furniture, phones, photo, video software. It's not necessarily going to be set up for what I'm doing. I could have called these fixed assets as a capital improvement, leasehold improvements. This will make more sense as I start to do the feed of my American Express card that I'm going to show you, because there are a lot of renovations that are happening on a property that I own. So there's a lot of capital improvements that are there. So the other questions that we're getting are for vehicle expense. What about mileage? Where would you categorize this if you're using your personal vehicle for continued use? My vehicle to get inventory or deliver things for people. So this is a accountant question. Specifically for you and your business. And the reason that I say that is that when you are using your personal vehicle, there are multiple ways that you could potentially handle this, and the tax benefits to it would be what would drive your decision. So you own the vehicle personally. If you are a sole proprietor partnership or LLC, you can then take mileage, right, as a personal deduction, because that everything is flowing through to your personal taxes. And so right now for mileage, I think the other day I saw it, it's like 72.5 cents or something like that per mile. So you will want to keep your mileage logs, and that actually is a personal tax deduction, not a business tax deduction. So that's why you wouldn't see it over here on the business taxes. However, when speaking to your accountant may then advise you, depending on the number of miles that you drive personally versus business, right? You've got to do the exchange one way or the other. So if you drive it more for business, you may say, okay, I want to put the interest that I'm paying as far as a loan. I might want to keep my fuel and repairs, and that value may be of a certain amount, and it may make sense to put that on your business taxes. However, every mile that you drive personally, then you will be deducting it the opposite way. Basically, you're paying back that amount. And I don't remember what that one is off the top of my head, but usually the personal side is lower than what the deduction you would get for using it for business miles. So in a nutshell, ask your accountant which one makes the most sense. They're probably going to tell you keep a mileage log and keep track of all your expenses. And at the end of the year, they'll tell you which way to go with that, and which makes the most sense. Earl has a question about fuel for equipment that says lawnmower. Best in the chart of accounts? Absolutely. I would add a fuel line in my expenses specifically for things like mowers, because you would definitely want to be tracking that. Obviously, if the business owns a vehicle, you are going to want to keep all of those vehicle items there. So I worked in the world of landscaping for many years. We had trucks, right? We have diesel fuel, we have mower gas, depending on the type. We would even separate the type of fuel that we were utilizing, because that we needed to know from a cost standpoint for the business how much we were spending. And certainly with things that are doing with gas prices right now, that's probably a expense that is not budgeted for, or at least your expectation at this moment. So I would add an account that is specific for that expense then, so that you can track it. All right, so we've got this fixed assets capital improvement. If I want to make this a sub account, I am actually going to make sub accounts out of this as we go through categorizing. So you'll see that. Basically, what that means is if I have a main fixed asset account or capital improvement account, as I'm calling it, I can then separate out each one of those improvements. So you're going to see, I think my cabinets are in there and various other things that are higher value. And so I'll actually create fixed asset lines for those specifically, so that I could see what that depreciation then looks like. Keep track of this for depreciation. I could check that box, which is nice because I've got this fixed asset feature in here that I could do. This is online plus though, so you have to make sure that you are in the correct account for QuickBooks as far as subscription levels. So Simple Start and Essentials will not let you track depreciation. However, your accountant will certainly give you that depreciation amount at the end of the year if you have fixed assets in there. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And then we're going to see that down here. Now we've got one fixed asset in our register, and we are going to switch over and start talking about bank transactions. So in the bank transactions, also found under accounting, the first time that you come in here to connect a bank account, you are going to see the screen. There's also in every screen that's the first time that you're in there as we start to move forward, there is going to be this nice little video right here. I highly recommend you watch those videos. They're super short. We're actually going to watch one of them together today because it is so good. And watch the little video. If you need to reference them after you've already gone in there, two things are going to happen. One, you're going to get an email after this class that's going to actually have some of these videos in there. So that way, if you want to catch back up and couldn't quite keep up today with adding things on your own QuickBooks, you can go back and watch those videos. You can also find them by clicking the big gear, and down in the top left corner, you will see the video tutorials. This is also where all of those are housed. So another easy way to go and find those. All right, so for the bank transactions, as I mentioned, I am going to connect my own American Express card because it's got a lot of random transactions that I think are going to be really good for today for you to see the categorizing. So we're just going to type in our bank account and see if it pops up, right? You might have noticed that there's also icons here at the front of the screen. And if this is one of your banks, you can just go ahead and choose it that way. But if you don't see it right there, instead of clicking the show more, the easiest way is just to start typing in your bank account. I am going to switch back to my slides for a minute because we're going to go through this through slides, and then I'm going to show you this step by step on the other side. So one more moment. If anybody has questions right now, this would be a good time to go ahead and pop those in there. Otherwise, we will keep moving forward. All right, so I mentioned before that this is the fastest, quickest process as far as QuickBooks is concerned. It involves these 5 steps. You will notice that we will drop out step 1 as we go through this because, and step 2, because once you've got the chart of accounts cleaned up, which we just did, once you've linked your bank account, it's already going to be there. You might have to log back in occasionally, but you also will need to categorize, reconcile, and review reports, and this will be an ongoing loop. Nancy's asking, how are you able to see what you've paid previously? Nancy, if you could just elaborate that on a little bit more. I'm not sure what you mean by that. So linking the bank accounts, once we get past that first screen where we've typed in what our account is, when we go to ask multiple questions, you have the ability to link an account at any time. So if you get a new bank account, it's going to be up there in that top right-hand corner where it says link account, if you just follow my little arrow over there. And I'll show you that once we're in that screen. But how do we link them? This is the step-by-step of what we do once we're in there. So we've got to go to that accounting menu, bank transactions, link it in the top right. We search for our bank, and then we follow the on-screen instructions. One thing you will need to have is your login information for your online banking. That's how it connects. So it's an electronic connection through online banking. So if you didn't sign up for online banking through your bank, you're going to want to do that because it's going to ask you for your username and password. It's also most likely going to make you verify multiple times. This is a secure connection. The downfall with it is if you have a credit union or a small regional bank, sometimes these are not bank accounts that you can connect to QuickBooks. So it's good for you to do that search and check to see if it is. There is a way around that if you are unable to do the live bank feed and it's through importing. I'm not going to go through this step by step. However, I did put the steps of how to do it in the slides here. That way, when you guys have a copy of the slides, and if you are someone that falls into that world, you can then see how you can import those transactions. So basically, it means you are going to go to your bank anyways. You're going to log into your online banking. You're going to download those transactions. And then there is a process in which you can then import them into QuickBooks. And so that is specific for those of you that might have those bank connections that are just not going to work with QuickBooks. There is often a step that you might have to do depending on your bank that provides the authorization for the bank to connect to a third party also. If you have one of those banks, QuickBooks will give you a notification that says, go to your bank, right? Huntington, if you have that, we have that very regionally in the Midwest. They do require that. So Huntington for years would break the bank feed every few days. You would have to re-log in. It was a security banger. So they have now circumvented that whole entire process by having you physically go into your online banking, check a box that says, yes, I give you the approval. And now the bank feeds are maintained a little bit longer. But don't be surprised for those of you that might only go into QuickBooks once a month. It happens, right? If you go in after a period of time, most likely your bank will break that bank feed or QuickBooks will break it just because there's been no activity or lack of activity. Once you reconnect it, though, it should, and I say it should, reconnect and refill in all of those transactions that you've had since the last time you logged in. Depending on the length of time, though, you might get yourself into trouble. So I've seen some people that have gone a few months, right, and their bank won't feed that far back as far as those bank transactions. Mark is asking a question about how do you input expenses paid for with your personal bank account. We'll talk about that one more step. Mark, remind me before the end if I don't cover that, but I should cover that during categorizing when we talk a little bit about what happens when I have a personal transaction in my business account. And then also I paid an invoice a month ago, wanted to be able to look up what I paid, how much and what date it was paid. Nancy, that will be actually the next class. We'll talk about invoicing. So hold that question until then. Susan, and my business bank account is the same institution as my personal accounts. Can I connect just the business? Absolutely, you can. When I go to connect my American Express account, there's two in there. One is my business, one is my personal. I'm only going to check the box that's for my business and not my personal. So you'll see that there. This is the import screen that I was talking about as far as how do you find where to import that data. Again, you're going to have those step-by-step instructions in there if you're one of those that falls into that. So the bank feed, I keep talking about bank transactions. That's also known as your bank feed. And as I mentioned, connecting bank accounts, this is where you're going to find all those bank accounts that are connected. As far as I know, there is no limitation on the number of accounts that you can have connected. I personally, in my own QuickBooks, have like 13 accounts that are connected. So I have seen more than that. Just know the more bank accounts you get, it's the more that you get to categorize and the more that you get to reconcile every single month, right? So I don't always advocate for a ton of accounts, but it just depends on what your business is, right? And so each one of those, though, needs to be managed every single month. The bank feed is where these are automatically imported from. Or if you have to do that manual import, this is also where they're going to go. So you're still going to see them there. You can review, categorize, and match transactions. These are words that you're going to see in the bank transactions. You're also going to hear me discuss them many times. So I'm going to say the word review, categorize, and match. You will have to do this process of actually looking at it or set up a rule, which we'll talk about those in a little bit, because the bank feed is just a live import, basically, of all of these transactions. You have to do something with them, though, which is that review, categorize, or match, and then post them to your account before they actually become part of QuickBooks. So don't fall into that trap. I have a lot of clients that will go through and they'll do all the categorizing and they say, well, why are my reports blank? If you did not import them or you did not post them, right, then you are not going to be able to see them as part of your reports because they're not technically in QuickBooks yet. The goal of the bank feed is to help you maintain accuracy by ensuring the transactions are properly assigned to the right accounts before they are recorded. Transactions stay in the bank feed until you've reviewed and accepted. The word now is post as they continue to do these updates in QuickBooks. So think of it as just a staging area. So I have a question. Can credit card statements be uploaded? Yes, it's actually not the statement itself that you're technically uploading. It is the downloaded transactions themselves that you're going to be doing. And yes, I just had another question about credit cards. Yes, credit cards are exactly the same. So you're not going to see me use a checking account today. You're actually going to see me use a credit card, which is going to be that live feed. You could also do many of those bank loans that you might have, right? So again, it depends on the bank specifically if they allow you to connect that loan or not. Credit lines of credit, right? This could be super helpful for a line of credit as well, especially if you are withdrawing funds and repaying those funds often. this is what the bank feed looks like then. You will see when we go into it, I'll show you more of the functionality. This only had one account that's connected at the top, one little box that's in green. The green shows that I'm highlighted on it. If I have multiple accounts, you're going to see multiple boxes all the way across the top there. The number in the right-hand corner is indicating how many transactions you have in the feed that you need to categorize. So right now, this one is showing that it has 5. This particular image is showing quite a few checks, right? There's a deposit in there, and then it looks like an electronic transaction as well. The little circle arrows here were the 11 hours. This is very important for you to watch, is that if it says something like 11 hours, I feel like that's a problem in my world. You might see a date on there. You might see a number of days as well. What that little number, at least there, is indicating to you is the last time the feed was live. Remember how I said it is a live feed, right? So generally, if you spend money, make money, it's automatically doing it. It could just be that this particular person hasn't spent money in the last 11 hours, so there hasn't been any kind of transaction that needed to happen with the bank feed. If you see that this is a date or a day ago or 5 days ago or something like that, often it's checking periodically regardless. Even if there hasn't been a transaction that's forced it to update. But you can click this little arrow circle thing here that says update, and that will then update your bank feed. If it is a connection that has been broken, you'll often have a little red exclamation point or a warning thing that's telling you that you need to re-log in and re-update. But this is generally what the bank feed is going to look like. All of these are sitting in pending. You can see that here. There's also a posted, so anything that you have already posted, you can go in and look to see that. And there's also an excluded, which under rare circumstances, you are going to exclude things. I do caution against that because if you exclude something, then it's not going to show up in QuickBooks. It's not going to show up in your reconciliation. It's going to make the automations that are going to happen from here on out much more difficult. I have a question about, can we connect our credit cards with the books to automate the transactions? Yes, from an import standpoint, but credit cards, the exact same thing as that bank transactions. There may be limitations to the particular credit card provider, but most of those credit card providers will connect, so you can have that automated feed coming in. All right, so the bank register. So I mentioned this is the staging area, right? This is what we're looking at. Now, what happens to them once we do that? So once we've posted them, they go into what's called our bank register. And if you recall when we were in the chart of accounts, over to the right, remember in income and expenses, I was telling you, you could run a report. And so you could see everything that has been categorized, right, in those particular accounts. However, anything on the balance sheet, which has a value, so our assets, liabilities, or our equity, over to the right there, you're going to see register. You're not going to see run report. And that is where all of these transactions will then go into, and you can see them in the bank register itself. You'll do a lot of back and forth between the bank transactions and the register, depending on what it is that you're doing within your business. So not just posted, but also you can see them in the bank register. I spend a lot of time in the bank register because that's more of an old school accounting way of doing things, not necessarily a QuickBooks way. You can direct enter things into the bank register as well. So we had that question about what do I do when I've got transactions? And I'll show you that trick on how to do those from that personal side. So the bank register, also called the chart of accounts register, right, shows all the transactions that have been recorded into QuickBooks. It also includes transactions that were entered manually. That's what I just mentioned, matched from the bank feed, or that have been reconciled as well. So you can add, edit, delete transactions directly in the register. There are some things that we'll talk about in doing that, but transactions in the register affect your financial reports and your bank reconciliation. So once they're in the register, you're going to see them in the reports. So this is the final ledger of the bank account in QuickBooks. So this is what a bank register looks like then. If you were to click into it, we'll be able to see what it looks like once I've categorized some of those Amex transactions that we talked about. It is looking like a spreadsheet, and every one of these headings at the top, you can filter by. So You'll see the little funnel here. You can set different settings, as well as the date has the little drop down caret. If I were to click that, it would then switch it. And so I could see the oldest transaction first as opposed to the newest transaction. I always feel like in the world of the register, it's way easier to see the newest transaction first because it's usually what I'm handling. I could see the type. So I've got some expenses in here. There's journal entries listed in here. I can then see the payee and the account. There's no payees on here. That would be in that white box. The account, though, I've got a repairs and maintenance. I've got general business expenses, office expenses, memos. These are those notes that you make to yourself, remember? Also, these would be the notes coming directly from the bank. So these capital letters are usually coming directly from the bank feed. It is what the bank said that transaction was. You can change those memos, add to them, get some journal entries. I can see if something was a payment or a deposit. And then I've got these C's, which I want to point out, as well as these little green boxes. So the C's mean they cleared the bank. So this is coming directly from the bank feed or has something to do with the bank feed, or I've checked it off as cleared. If I had an R there, it means I've reconciled it, which means I did step 4 in my 5-step process. And if it's blank, that means it was direct entered or manual entered. It didn't clear the bank. And you'll be able to see a difference in those because we'll do some direct entry when we go to do our reconciliation. And then I'll have my balance over here. The little green boxes mean it's matched up to some other kind of transaction in that bank feed. So there, I'll show you how to be able to tell that as well as we start to get in there. So the difference between the bank feed and the register, as I went over this, so the feed is live. You're either importing or categorizing directly off of it. It's coming from the bank feed. These are all pending. They require you to review them. You can categorize, match before adding to the register. It has no impact on your books whatsoever until you've actually posted it. However, the bank register, that means this is where you're viewing and managing reviewed or recorded transactions. They have been specifically added. They will affect your reports because they're there. You can edit, delete, manually enter things from the bank register. So categorizing, we're going to spend some time categorizing once I connect this account so you can see that process. Recall what you know about the chart of accounts as being very important, right? Is it an asset, liability, equity, income, expenses? I also spend so much time on the chart of accounts because what expense was it? What asset is it? Is it a liability? Which one is it, right? So that I can easily type in what that account is so I'm not scrolling through things. The relevant terms that you would need to know when you're in there is matching. This happens because the transaction is already in QuickBooks. There's a couple reasons that this could happen. One, I might be proactively entering things into QuickBooks, which we're going to cover a lot of that in the next class. I could also have 2 accounts connected and the like transaction is showing up. So QuickBooks thinks it's a match. It doesn't necessarily mean it is. So this could be I transferred from my checking account to my savings account and my bank feed is showing the exact same transaction happening between 2 accounts, right? And so I just match that. That is how I make sure that I don't duplicate that exact same transaction. That transferring, as I mentioned, is between 2 accounts in your chart of accounts. Be aware or be very aware of things that come up as an unassigned asset. So remember, this is one of those, or uncategorized asset might be the other word. If I have a random bank account that I'm transferring something to, and by random, I mean it's probably personal. So I've transferred out of my business account to my personal account. QuickBooks knows there was a transfer of money, has no idea where it went. So it's probably going to call it unassigned or uncategorized. And the error would be to go ahead and post that. That's incorrect, right? Because it's then going to show up as an asset for the business, even though it's QuickBooks was telling me to do it that way. Instead, what I'm going to do is change that unassigned asset to owner's pay and personal, right? Because I'm transferring it to my personal account. And that is the appropriate way to do it, as we learned in that first class. Credit card payments, these are payments to the credit card account, which is a liability. We don't call credit card payments an expense. It is the actual use of the card that creates that expense, and you'll see some of that. Transaction type, that is it an expense? Is it a transfer? Is it a credit card payment? Is it a deposit? Splitting, you might have seen that on the previous screen. I'll show you how to split a transaction directly out of the bank feed and also exclude, as I mentioned. is one of those options in there. And this will make a little bit more sense when we get into the screen and we start doing this one by one. So when I mean review, there's a couple things that I mean by that. So as I'm looking at my bank transactions, this little thing indicated here, you'll see these little sparkles, I think QuickBooks calls them. Sparkles is the AI part of things. And the sparkles are meaning that QuickBooks is guessing for you, maybe by using AI. Sometimes it's intelligently, sometimes it's not. In most classes, if anybody's been using QuickBooks, the general consensus is it's right about 50% of the time. That means it's wrong 50% of the time also. So it's very important that we just do not take what QuickBooks is telling us as this category here and that we switch it so that we can make sure that we've got the correct category there if we need to. If it's correct, everything looks correct here from this standpoint, no problem. All I have to do is go over here to the right and click that blue post. Once I've posted it, remember, it's going to take it out of the bank feed and it's going to move it into the register. If I need to review it a little bit further, so this check number 1074, I'm going to review this a little bit further. I click anywhere on this line and I can open it up. And when I open it up, QuickBooks is going to give me a little bit of AI insight as why they think you should consider using this. It might be right, it might not. But if it is right, again, or it's not, I can come down here to account. I can change that. And then I can then post it from this standpoint as well. But that's how I could review things and actually see that's here. I'll notice at the top, I can see the full bank description. Now, that's the same thing that we're going to see here. What I mean by full is sometimes you just got this little tiny a bit of information and I need to see more of the information. Unfortunately, with a check, I get what I get, right? And I'm not going to get much more than that. This is coming from the bank. There is nothing you can do to change this. This is not a QuickBooks thing. You could take it for what it is, right? Hopefully you're recording what those checks are. Your bank probably has images as well. Those other terms that I mentioned, post is here, split is here. I'll show you how to activate split or do that. Also creating a rule. We're going to talk about rules here in a second, and then that exclude button is there as well. So that's how we can review then by clicking that open. So rules, I want to mention rules because automations are amazing and we want those automations and we want them to be right is the other part of it. And so I have seen the use of rules be detrimental to someone's maintaining of their books. I've also seen it be amazing. So I like to mention it and I say, be wary. They can be your best friend or they can be your worst enemy. So the limitation with rules is in the wording and the way that you set them up. And if it is very vague, then QuickBooks doesn't know what to do. One example of it is I had a client that was using Square as their point of sale. They also had Squarespace for a website. So the word Square shows up in that name twice, right? Square is one and Squarespace is the other. QuickBooks doesn't know what to do with it, and there is no way to have altered that in any way to change that. So unfortunately, with this particular client, she still had to go through and manually categorize everything that said Square and everything that said Squarespace, because the rule would have just taken it and put it into one or the other, and that was problematic. QuickBooks will often force you to use rules and to auto-confirm. Auto-confirm is the part that is very important to recognize and see here in the beginning. And I'll show you how to set up a rule and I'll show you what I mean. QuickBooks defaults to auto-confirm. And what that means is you set up the rule and then you never see the transaction again as it comes in. So case in point being Squarespace. I've seen one with the word Chase in it that was $3 million error, right? Because Chase just kept going into one account and the particular business had multiple accounts for Chase. So if we are not auto-confirming, which means it will still put the rule on it, it will still show up in the bank feed, and you'll know that it has a rule because it'll actually indicate that it has a rule set up. And then you can trust but verify at this point. And so I would just test a rule, any rule that I set up, I would test it for at least 2 to 3 months cycle. And then once I know that it is behaving as I would expect it, then I can turn on auto confirm. And that's where it's beautiful because I know the rule is working correctly. Auto confirm can happen, which means I then never see it in the bank feed. It will just automatically post it and go into the register. So my quantity of items in that bank feed becomes much, much smaller. And then I can see all that when I look at my reports. So the danger in rules generally is because they're behaving not the way that you expected them. And then maybe you weren't reviewing your reports either to ensure that everything was working correctly as well. But these can be wonderful once you know that they are working correctly. And as I mentioned before, I will go into these and show you how these actually look. So questions, I'm going to jump back over to the questions because I see we've got quite a few in here. And then I'm going to go into my QuickBooks and I'm going to make sure that I connect my Amex account on a separate screen, right? Because I'm entering my information. And then once I've got that connected, you'll be able to see all the bank transactions then start to feed in. So once I've entered my password in there. But it looks like from a question standpoint, we've got a few in here. One is I have problems recording refunds and returns from my purchases. That's because you need the refunds and returns account and you need to categorize those correctly. I don't know that I'll have any refunds or returns in the bank feed to show you that, but it's not calling those income, not calling them expenses, right? So we're deducting from income, and it really is important that you have that separate account in your chart of accounts. Another question, who would be the right help to verify that we have set up QuickBooks the right way to set up all accounts? Definitely an accountant is a great resource, as well as contact the New York Small Business Development Center. Jenny and her team, they should be able to help you with some guidance with that as well. The bank feed and bank register are somewhat redundant. No, not at all, actually. They are, if they are working correctly, I guess is the way to say that. The bank feed is the holding area. The bank register is where they are once you have categorized them and add them. So yes, spending a lot of time in the bank feed, categorizing from there, but if you never go into the bank register, that is not okay. The bank register is what you would see when you are doing reconciliation, but it is possible that you would not really go into the bank register much of any other time unless it's something that you wanted to direct enter or something that you're looking up that you're trying to find something. So definitely you're going to spend the majority of your time in the bank feed, and then the bank register is just when you're looking for something, I guess is the better way to put it. Someone says, I added money manually, one deposit for 4 book sales. How do I categorize it? So it's probably income, right? So whatever your income account is, you want to choose account and choose that income account. Do I attach the receipt before I post the expenses? Yes, great question. So there are multiple ways to do receipts, as we talked about before. You're going to see me do it without a receipt today. You can, there is a new AI integration actually that happened in the app. And so when it recognizes there's a receipt, it will ask you immediately if you want to go ahead and categorize that expense right there. So that's actually more on the proactive side, and we will discuss that before we'll discuss that next class as opposed to here. But you can attach receipts. There is a spot to do an attachment before we post the expense. You can also go back and do it after you've posted the expense, but that's kind of a pain, right? There is a different spot, if you notice, and I'll show you where it is, where those receipts are actually going to fill in. So there are multiple things from a receipt standpoint. Under the chart of accounts, I mentioned fuel expense from landscaping business instead of a separate line item for fuel expense when your reports lump all fuel transactions together under a more broad expense. So it depends, right? It's how we set up the chart of accounts. If we have the chart of accounts set up to call it a fuel expense for the mowers or fuel expense for the trucks, right? That's differentiating often gas versus diesel, depending on what it is. Then I am dictating which one of those accounts it's going to go into. QuickBooks is not going to lump that into unless I've given it the ability to lump it into that. QuickBooks utilizing as point of sales as well. Yes, QuickBooks could be utilized as a point of sale. They have their own point of sale, as well as you could use other point of sale accounts for that. All right, we're going to go into this. We are now 1 hour passing over. And it is time to do a little bit of categorizing with our bank transactions. All right, so you're going to see the screen here for a second. When I do enter my Amex stuff, we're going to take a short break, right, to get to do that. But I did want to mention the receipts over here to the left because we had that question. So if I were to click receipts, this is where they're all going to flow into, as opposed to bank transactions. And so if I want to upload them from my device, you'll also notice that I have this specific email address that QuickBooks provides me. If I utilize this email address, this is if someone were to send me a receipt in an email. Often we'll get receipts in email. We can just forward that receipt to this email address and it will come in here. You'll notice I have the same process in here that I have to review items, as well as I can see anything that I have reviewed and that is in here. If I've proactively entered a receipt, though, what's going to happen in my bank transactions is it should show up as a match, as opposed to something that I have to categorize directly. Now, we're not going to see any matches today necessarily because all of this is coming in as if I've just connected my bank account for the very first time. And so nothing else is in QuickBooks, right? So we're going to go ahead and take a break here for just a few minutes while I enter this information. And I'm going to switch off of this screen. I jumped back in at one moment and then it took my screen away. So, which is interesting because I assist a lot of clients. I think it's the security measures that Amex has specifically that will not allow Zoom and you to have any part of the Amex windows open when you're going through the verification process.
I see.
Good to know.
Yeah, now you know.
However, now we know. And there were two important pieces of information that happened while I had to get past the verification screen. So I'm going to discuss those right now so that you are aware of what happens, even though you won't be able to see it. So we did have questions about adding these accounts previously. So I had mentioned that you need to add accounts to the chart of accounts if you have a new account. However, if you were adding a new bank account or a credit card or anything of that nature, you don't actually have to go into the chart of accounts first to add that account. You can do that within the linking of the bank account. We also had a question, if I have personal accounts and business accounts, do I have to, can I still do it, right? Yes. So when you get into the verification screen, once you've connected your bank account, so we've put in our password, the next screen that you're actually going to get to is the one that is going to show you all of your accounts that you have with whichever financial institution you're trying to connect. And you would check the appropriate boxes. So as I mentioned before with American Express, I have more than one account on here with American Express or more than one account with American Express. However, I just wanted to show you guys this card today. So I check that box. Then it will take me back to QuickBooks. And when I'm in QuickBooks, it's then going to ask me what account in my chart of accounts that should be connected to. If I have already added that account, so I've manually added it, right? I've gone into the chart of accounts, I've done a new account, then I would choose the appropriate account. Otherwise, you're going to add another account right now with it. Now, it's only added a generic account in my chart of accounts called a credit card. I would recommend that you change that. So as I mentioned before, if you have a ton of accounts, you typically want to say the financial institution, and I would highly recommend that in your chart of accounts, you utilize the last four digits of that account. The same thing would happen if you have fixed assets, right? So it's usually the last four digits of a VIN number if you have a vehicle. And this is just the easy way for you or someone else who may be working for you or with you to be able to tell the difference between those accounts. I've seen people say Huntington 1, Huntington 2. Like, how do you know what Huntington 1, Huntington 2, right, is if you're going to have someone else that's helping you with reconciling in particular or cleaning up your chart of accounts or looking at your reports. So I now have this American Express connected. The other thing that it's going to ask you is what is the start date for pulling in these transactions? Now, a month ago when it was tax season, it's very popular for people to say, I want all of last year because I haven't done last year yet. which is fine. If you do it that way, you can pull in all of last year as long as your financial institution allows you to do that. However, you're going to have a ton of transactions that you're going to have to go through and then categorize. So keep that in mind. That might actually be easier to do outside of QuickBooks, but it's also good practice to do inside of QuickBooks. For today's purposes, I've actually pulled in April. So I set the date to be April 1st, and that's so that I can show you the reconciliation process when we get there. So this is all of the transactions that have filtered in. There's actually 56. According to that number, you can see there. You can also see that my little swoopy arrows, I guess it is, says as of 0 minutes ago. So I can be very confident that this is extremely up to date right now. Again, this is that update if I need to update it. If for some reason that is not there. Other than that, everything looks very normal. Now, with this volume of transactions, right? 56, in my opinion, is not a lot. It's a month and a half on one credit card, so therefore it is a lot. I'm behind on schedule. However, you could have thousands in here potentially, depending on how much information that you pull in. A trick to this, to get everything grouped together so you can handle them a little bit faster, is actually to hit this top title here that says bank description. If I hit bank description, you notice this little arrow popped up, and it actually is going to then lump together all of the transactions with the same bank description. And so I can go through and handle these a little bit faster. With Amazon specifically, and it's the very first time that I've been using it. So you're going to see like these little warnings over here, right? Because AI hasn't had a chance to start really doing its work yet. Doesn't really know. It's just assuming this is that off its expense, but it's not sure. However, if I'm pretty confident that Amazon, and I know at least from my business standpoint, everything that I'm purchasing from Amazon is an office expense, then I can go ahead and post that. So that's a single transaction, right? Everything looks normal and clean. I can just click that. However, now I've lost that ability, or I've lost that. The more that you utilize this system, what it's going to do is it's going to recognize that Amazon, for the most part, I've put office expense on here, and it will then start filling in all of this as office expense. So it'll go a little faster. The other thing that I can do, because I have such a large volume of transactions in here, I could use these checkboxes over to the left. And when I use these checkboxes over to the left, you'll notice down at the bottom, I now have this bar up here. Now I'm going to leave one of these Amazon transactions because we're going to play around with it here in a second. But I can directly edit all of these. And now this means they are all identical, right? So if these are different, then this is not going to work. But I can edit them straight from here, and I can choose that account that I want. Now, this is that scrolling that I talked about. Almost always, everybody will jump right in here and start scrolling until they find office expense. Although I see it on the screen, let's pretend I don't. The fastest way to do it is just to start typing office, and then I can get there. That is, if I have a lot of things in my chart of accounts, right? I could be spending all day scrolling, and it's amazing how it's right in front of your face, and sometimes you still can't even see it. So if that's all I needed from there, then I'm going to say apply and post. Now, you'll notice I didn't change the transaction type. I didn't change the vendor because it already had that information on there, or I didn't feel like it was necessary to add any more to it. Now, if I'm switching it from the expense to a deposit or something like that, then obviously I would want to change that transaction type. Now I can come into this Amazon though, and I'm going to click anywhere on that line. So this is where I need to review it, because this amount I'm not real sure about. It's going to go ahead and populate it with that same information that I had before. It already is saying that it's an expense. It's already saying that it's Amazon. This full bank description, as I mentioned before, that's coming from the bank, that's not really giving me any detail. If we all know about Amazon, we can just go to the Amazon orders and we can double check what we had. Well, in this one in particular, the reason I wanted to show it to you is because I bought more than one thing here. And so in order to get there, all I did was click the word split. So this means I have more than one item that I purchased from Amazon. It's not all office expenses. And so I have the option. It's automatically going to populate with 2. If it happens to be 3, 4, 5, whatever it may be, I just click this add lines button and I can get more. But I'm going to click this category and I'm going to say the first one was office expenses and it was for $50. So I'm going to put that amount there. If I need to add the description, I can say paper. And the other one, we're going to call that cost of goods sold. Notice I'm always typing. I do have sub-accounts in my cost of goods sold. So if I have sub-accounts, the corporate says I'm supposed to be using my sub-accounts. I don't want to put them in that main parent account. They're all going to roll up in there. So I need to say if it was supplies and materials or subcontractor. Obviously for this, Amazon is not my subcontractor. It's going to be supplies and materials. It keeps a running tally down here at the bottom. So I know what that difference is. And I can say for this, it's 78.64. Now there might be some differences, taxes, I would have to do the math to figure that out. But then I can say split and post. And so that's going to take that out there. That's going to split and post. Now I've got these warning things again, because it's trying to figure out what in the world I'm doing. And so meals, the reason it's giving me a warning for meals is it knows that the Cheesecake Factory is meals. But remember, I need to differentiate those. Was that a 100% expense or a 50% expense, right? Was it meals with clients or was it travel? For this one in particular, I know it was a travel meal. I'm going to click travel meal and I'm going to click post. Now you notice I'm not putting a vendor on everything. If it is a vendor that I need to track within the system, I absolutely want to put the vendor on there. What I mean is, do I want to pull a report for this particular vendor? For Cheesecake Factory in general, don't really need to pull a vendor report for that, in my opinion. Some people will add a miscellaneous vendor, and that's for those all one-off type things that you don't need to track. However, there might be other vendors in there that I definitely want to track. So for this one in particular, this is definitely travel. DoorDash, it's asking me again. This was a meal with clients. It now has added all three of those because I've changed one. I can then come over here to the left. I can click that button. I can post. I could have done that same click the button and post and done the editing. Earth Breeze, this is office supplies or office expenses. I can add that in post. Expedia, definitely travel. Post that. Free tax, this is actually professional expenses, not office expenses. Professional services. So maybe anytime I see freetaxusa.com, I want to go in here and I want to create a rule behind this. Okay, so this is saying based off transaction details, no related history. That's what it thinks it should be. I don't always have to pay attention to that, right? But I'm going to create a rule now for this. Now, again, this might not be the best one to create a rule for because freetaxusa.com, I guess it's all coming up in one word. It might jump that into something else, but that's also why I'm going to test this. So I'm going to call this rule something. I have to give it a name. I'm going to call it Tax USA. It is money out. I can choose if I want it to be all bank accounts that are connected or if it's just a specific bank account. I'm basing this off of the text from the bank, not the amount. I can also say contains, doesn't contain, or is exactly. So if this is the bank description that's coming over and I'm worried about free getting picked up or USA or Calm or any of those getting picked up, I could say is exactly. And that means it has to be that phrase exactly. Now, if you go to a lot of Shell stations or Marathon stations or any of those kind of gas stations, right? Fueling stations for those that were asking about fuel, then you probably don't want to say is exactly because they often have a code for the store number after it, and that will affect your rule. This test rule, common misconception is that the test that I keep talking about, no, that is not. Then we're going to go down here and we're going to look at our transaction type. We're going to call it an expense. I said for this one in particular, for me, it's a professional service. This could even be a cost of goods sold if you're a bookkeeper or an accountant. The payee, I may or may not add that. This is if I want to replace the bank memo. I don't want to replace the bank memo. I can just say to leave it as is, right? I'm not replacing it. But this is that little toggle on, toggle off button for auto confirming that I had mentioned that you want to pay attention to. If this is green, then what it's doing is you're not going to see it in the bank feed. It's automatically just going to go into your bank register. However, if I turn it off, it's going to apply the rule, but I still am going to see it in the bank feed, and that's how I can test it. And so I'm going to save it. So once I save it, I can come back up here. If I refresh, hopefully it doesn't kick me out. The rules should apply, fingers crossed. Oh, now it's going to add in some AI powering, it's saying. Yes, now you can see the rule is applied. So that's how you can tell when there is a rule. Obviously, if it's green and it says rule, and I would come in here and say, no, that's not a professional service for this one, it's an office expense. The rule is broken. There is something wrong with the rule, right? So if I've ever had to change it. And if I get to that situation where it is broken, then I can come over here to rules on the left-hand side. And I'm going to say go to rules, and I'm going to see my little rule in here. And I can open this up, I can edit it here, and I can fix whatever was wrong with it. I can also delete it from here, and I can also auto add. If this is green right here, if there's a little green box here, then the auto add is on. And remember, that's danger unless we're for sure wanting to turn that on. But if I know that the rule is working correctly in the next couple months, this is the path to get to turning those on. So my rule is good for the moment, but I'm still testing it because I don't trust that it's going to work absolutely correct. So I'm going to say free text USA, and we're going to post. For right now, for timing purposes, I'm going to go ahead and post all of these. I know I said don't do that, but we're going to assume that most everything is correct. I'm going to come through here and uncheck anything that doesn't have. And this is just so we can get this information in here so I can show you how to reconcile before the class ends today. All right, I'm going to post those. Now with IKEA. So with IKEA, that's the smaller one. This is the bigger one. So I went to my accountant, and my accountant told me anything over $1,000, I should be listing as a fixed asset, not as an expense. So I know that I just made this purchase at IKEA, and I don't have a fixed asset account for what I was doing here. So I'm going to add a new account. That's how I can add one on the fly. I wouldn't recommend doing this necessarily unless it's a very specific reason that you're adding this account. Remember, because we actually went into our chart of accounts and deleted everything or inactivated everything. And the problem that we can get into here is that we start adding accounts back that we've already inactivated, right? And there was a reason that we inactivated them. This is one of those things that I actually don't like about QuickBooks and the fact that it can do this, because it's way too easy to start adding accounts back when we should have gotten rid of them in the first place. So this account name specifically, I'm going to write part of the, I'm just going to say cabinets, because I've already added my main capital improvement account, if you remember. So this is the fixed asset. We're going to call this one other tools and equipment, but we're going to check this box to make it a sub account of that capital improvements. And that's important when I start tracking depreciation. I'm not going to check that right now because most of you are not going to be using that, but you can see how this parent account, sub account relationship is going to look. And then I'm going to save it. And it says, do you want to lock the parent account? It's optional, general good and practice to keep them empty. For this particular case, yes, I do want to lock the parent account, which means I'm not going to accidentally choose the parent account. So remember, we talked about that with cost of goods sold, that I might accidentally choose the parent account when really I should have said if it was cost of goods sold supplies and materials or cost of goods sold direct subcontractor. So that's a nice feature that they've added in recently that wasn't there before. So now the computer is going to automatically think, or QuickBooks is automatically going to think, that anything with IKEA in here is this cabinet. And it might be, I just want to verify that it is before I choose it. But I can go ahead and select both of these because these are both part of that exact same transaction. And I can post it. And I think I've got a couple things from Home Depot, but they're smaller. Nope, all my bigger stuff is gone from that standpoint. So these, because of their being smaller account or smaller amounts, obviously, if they were part of a bigger fixed transaction, then I would want to go ahead and add that. However, for this Home Depot, these are probably just supplies in my world. And so I'm going to just choose supplies. I can still post one at a time over to the right instead of checking the things to the left. This was actually a personal transaction. So I go, oh no, did not mean to Instacart on my business account. So what do I do? Remember, we have owners, owner, draw. So that's how I can choose the equity account when I accidentally utilized a business account for personal use. I can choose it directly from here. The same thing if I pay for something with my own personal money, right? But I still need to call it a business expense. I can do the flip side of that. But so the Instacart we're gonna do that. There's that one too. Look at that. I did it twice. Must have only had my business card when I was in Kentucky. So owner's draw, LinkedIn. We can call this professional services. We can call this office expense. Just depends on which way it looks right for you. This looks like this was actually a refund for entertainment with clients. Sutherland's, this is repairs and maintenance. So sometimes the suggestions are correct. This was actually office expense. Sometimes the computer doesn't know, but the more that you're doing this, the more that it will learn exactly what it was. This one in particular, I am not remembering exactly what it was. I'm just going to call it an owner's draw just for timing standpoint. This is office expense, post. This was part of my capital improvements, which was my cabinets. And I'm going to post that. Okay, so I know that was a very quick way of showing you how to categorize, but you can kind of see what the general flow is. Obviously, the more often that you come in here, the less the number of transactions that are going to be in there for you to actually go through and categorize. But once I've got this green check mark, that means there's nothing there. But remember, it is live. It will fill back up tomorrow. As I mentioned before, posted, I can go over here to posted. I can see everything that I've posted. If at this time I'm coming back to add that vendor, if I did accidentally put the wrong category on it and I went, oops, why did I do that? Then I can come back over here to the posted and I can switch here. Also, if I need to do something greater, like if I do need to split it, in order to split it, I am going to have to undo. When I undo, what it does is it just brings it right back over. So if I undo here, it's just going to bring it right back over to pending. And I can look at it here. I can select the correct category from this standpoint, and then I can post it again. So that's how I can fix some of those problems. All right, so now it's the very end of the month and I need to reconcile my bank account. So everything from August or April, oh my gosh, I don't even remember what month it is right now. Everything from April has been categorized. I saw that in here. And so I am going to go over here to reconcile. One other thing that I want to point out while we're on this categorization screen, because it's pretty important. Someone mentioned, do I need to go back and look at my bank register or do I just stay in my bank feed, right? There are two reasons that I said that you might go back into your bank register, right? You're looking for something or you need to fix something. Right here, if we want to know the difference between what we've posted in QuickBooks and what our bank account actually says, this is one of the easiest places to see it. And so I can tell that yes, QuickBooks in my register and what my bank says are exactly the same, right? Doesn't happen all the time. That's kind of a hard number to get to unless you're doing your reconciliation and everything is clean. If this posted number is different than what your bank is, there could be a couple reasons for that. You could be doing some reactive things or not reactive, some proactive things, right? So you're entering transactions before they've ever hit the bank. So you know you're going to spend money, you've paid bills in QuickBooks, but it hasn't hit the bank yet. There could be this lag, right? So there might be that timing there. As well as you could have transactions in your bank register that were incorrect or inaccurate, and you didn't do the reconciliation process or you didn't clean them up when you did reconciling. So you can see them different here. The other place that you'll see them is if we go back into the chart of accounts, and you're going to see numbers over here now because I've added some things in. And so these numbers, bank balance versus QuickBooks balance. Now remember, this is the credit card, so you often are going to see it in a negative position instead of positive position because it's a liability. Don't be concerned if one's positive and one's negative. It's the way it's feeding in. these numbers are matching each other, right? So I can see them there as well. I can also see my register here. So that's what I mentioned before, view register. So I can click view register. I see all the C's. I see all the little green boxes. I know all those transactions came in. If I see some of those transactions without that C on there, that means I might have manually entered them. We did have a question about, I have a personal expense that needs to have an expense entry for QuickBooks, right? And I need to enter it in there. One of the easiest ways, at least that I know how to do it, is coming directly into this owner's investment register, because owner's investment is where we know that the money that we've spent on the personal side is coming into the business. There's this little drop down here that says we can transfer or we can do a journal entry. And so this is actually going to be called a journal entry. But if you're on this screen, this is the easiest way to see it in the same methodology that I just taught you. So I can choose the date that it happened. It might have been in April. We'll say April 6th, right? Still have my payee. So if I want to choose a vendor, or if I paid a subcontractor or whoever that may be, that I'm going to want to enter the vendor or whoever that may be, I already have a few of them in here because it automatically was entering them as I went along. But I could also choose the account. The account that we're going to choose is the account for the actual expense. So if I bought some office supplies with my personal money, now I want to increase the money coming in, right? Because I'm increasing the amount of my investment. And I can say this was $100. And so I'm going to do that increase, and it's going to say save. And so I've got my owner's investment for $100. It'll look a little bit different over here on the chart of accounts. So there it's positive, right? So I've increased the amount of investment coming in. If I were to run a report, then on office expenses, if I want to prove to myself that it happened, then I say run report. The last 90 days is fine because this happened in the last 90 days, but if for some reason it didn't, I'll want to change that date. And here I can see it right here at the very top. It says it's a journal entry. I didn't add a description. Shame on me, I should have, so I knew what that was. But there's that $100 that got recorded. So I've increased the amount of equity that I've put into the business by $100. And I've offset it by saying what that actual expense was for that $100. So that was one of those questions that we had earlier. So let's go back to our chart of accounts. We're actually going to reconcile now. In order to reconcile, I'm going to pull up my Amex statement. You're going to see all of this happen. Hopefully it's going to let me in there while I'm still on Zoom and I don't have to go away. But any questions that anybody has, if you want to go ahead and drop those in the Q&A, I will try to circle back to those while I do this.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions. So we can work on those once you're done showing the reconciling.
Okay. This is generally where the most questions are because you will be spending the majority of your time doing this from here on out. And I did not double check the statement date for my statement. So the reconciliation is not going to be quite what I want it to be because Amex actually closed out on April 10th and I didn't pull in all of those transactions. So we're just going to see a little bit of what the reconciliation looks like as opposed to having all of the information in there, but it will actually be a good example of what happens when you have a problem that you need to troubleshoot. All right, so this is actually the little video that we are going to watch. So as soon as I share my screen, and I think last time you couldn't hear the sound, probably because I had my earbuds in. I think it's the problem. We might get some background noise here too.
There's a
So,
checkbox too that has to be activated for share with sound.
okay, why is it not letting me? Probably because I'm an American Express. It won't let me do it. Boy, American Express is, I must say, their security is far superior to what a lot of things that I've seen. It doesn't, it will not let Zoom have anything to do with it when it's on. If you noticed, I'm in the incognito window also because it knew that I had already been in Zoom. Um, okay, so here's our little video that we're gonna watch. Maybe? Nope, I skipped past it. Just kidding. We're not gonna watch the little video that way. We're gonna come up here and we're gonna find it. If there was a search bar, that would be very helpful. All right, you know what? I'm gonna skip the video. That no time for that. All right,
Christy,
so
is there a link?
yes,
Are these videos outside of QuickBooks as
yes,
well? Then just send me the link and I'll make sure
yep.
everybody gets it.
I will. It will be in that follow-up. Okay. So when I do the reconciliation, I need to choose the account that I'm reconciling. Now notice I've only connected one account here. This is where I get a lot of questions for this as well. However, there are many accounts that you can reconcile. Not all of them include a statement. However, you can go in and you can confirm values that are happening within these accounts to be correct. Obviously, if you have a statement, it makes it much easier. If you're reconciling something like sales tax, you do actually have items that you can go back against that and confirm. So we're going to go to this Blue Business Cash, though. That's that checking account or that Amex account. Now, the beginning balance is the very first thing that you want to confirm. So this beginning balance should equal your prior statement. So if I'm looking at my Amex statement right now at the top, I should have my previous beginning balance that's on there. Now, since I just connected this account, this is actually the balance of the account as of April 1st, because that's the day that I did it. And it only fed in all the transactions after that. So it's not actually matching my particular statement. The next thing I'm going to enter is my ending balance for my account. Now, depending on what subscription level of QuickBooks that you are using, you probably are going to have two things happen up here. One is going to ask you just to drop in your full statement. It's really amazing when the AI can do this for you. It does require plus or higher to do it. However, it will go through your entire statement, pull out anything that's missing or doesn't belong. It will cross-reference between the two and it will kind of flag everything for you. So it is much more powerful than you're going to see right here. Also, I could enroll in automatic statements once those start coming in, then I don't have to go to my bank and I don't have to find those as well. But right now, I do need to physically or manually go to my statement. I need to look at it and I need to get this number directly off of here to say what my new balance was. And according to this, my new balance is 86.92.45. And then I'm going to put in what my statement end date was. And according to my statement, it tells me that it was actually April the 10th. And so I'm going to say April the 10th. And then I click Start Reconciling. Now, when I get into here, what I'm looking for is that this difference is 0. There's a green check mark here, and everything is beautiful and clean and fabulous. If I don't have that check mark, then that means that there was an error of some kind, and it's saying that it's a difference of $48.56. In order to get this to work like this, you do have to have an active bank feed with the bank transactions checked. So if you're only proactive accounting, I do recommend that you go ahead and connect your bank account regardless, match through everything. This step will do this from an automated standpoint. Obviously, this should be very clean because I just did all of this, right? I just added it all in. Now, this $48.56, number one trick, very first thing that I always do when I'm reconciling and I have something off, I go to the bottom of all of these transactions or the most recent transactions that's as close to the statement date, and I see if it's there. Here you can see there's one that is $48.56. If I uncheck this little green bubble over here, it's going to 0. Now, I'm obviously going to look at my bank statement and I'm going to confirm that that $48.56 wasn't on there. However, because of the statement timing, you probably will see it's not there, right? But it did come into the bank feed And what is driving this is that I said that the last day was on 410. And so on 410, I needed to be able to see all of those transactions. If everything is correct in here, all these the check marks are correct. I've confirmed that $48.56 is not on my statement, then I can say finish now. If any of these are incorrect, like, oops, my statement ending balance was not what I thought it was, my beginning balance, that's a whole different situation. I can click edit info and I can edit that statement ending balance or that statement ending date. If I have transactions in here, usually those happened prior to the statement date that I'm in that were not reconciled in previous months, which means this $48.56 at the very bottom here will carry over to next month. Now, if it didn't show up on next month's statement either, it should because it's part of the bank feed. However, things do happen. I have to do something with that transaction to correct it. And I'll show you that here in a second. I'm just going to say finish now. I'm going to say done. And now let's say in theory, it is already past May the 10th, right? Ironically, I haven't gotten my statement for May yet. But if I want to say that my statement ending balance, I'm going to make up a balance just to show you what this looks like. And then I'm going to say my statement ending date is actually today. And I'm going to start reconciling. Now, there's going to be all kinds of crazy things happen in here because I've got a lot of things from that date. But let's say that I go back and I look at my statement. And this is kind of what it'll look like if these transactions didn't reconcile in a prior month. And it's important for you guys to see this. What I would do at this time is that I know these are electronic transactions and they should have been included. So I need to fix these. I need to figure out what the problem was. So the question about it's in the register, or do I need to go back and look at the register? This is kind of where this all comes into play. I am going to want to click these and I can edit these and I can further scrutinize these and decide if this was accurate or not accurate. Now, if it's not accurate, I can delete it. And when I do delete it, if I say more and I come down here and I say void or delete, all that is doing when I do this is actually taking it out of my bank register. But remember, this was a live bank feed item. And so recall that I said the word exclude. This is where this is going to come into play. So for whatever reason, the bank said this transaction happened. It never showed up on my statement. I can't just leave it in my bank register because that is showing that I have an incorrect expense, right? It's inflating my expense. It's also changing my bank account. So I'm going to delete it. And it's going to ask, do you want to delete it? And what I need to do from the bank feed standpoint is I have to go back over into my bank feed then. And this is only if it was in the bank feed. This isn't if it was manually added. It's now over here in the bank feed. We've already confirmed that it's not accurate. It's not coming back. This is where it would be appropriate, and about the only time that it's appropriate for me to actually exclude something, because it will remain part of this live bank feed in perpetuity. So if I say exclude, then it moves it to exclude. And that's only because there's some kind of error in the bank feed. I do see these periodically, which is why I wanted to mention them in this video that you have them. So other than that, if everything is correct though, I can go back to my reconciling. I can hit resume reconciling. I can check all my things, see if they're all included. If they're not, I've got some errors in here that I need to go back in and I need to troubleshoot. I'm going to leave this at the moment because the last thing that we're going to talk about today, and I'm only going to show it for a couple minutes, then we're going to hit the rest of these questions that we have. But we will revisit the reports next week, so don't be concerned. Is that the fifth step in the process after we've reconciled is to review our reports. And so in order to do that, we're going to go over here to the left where it says reports, and we're going to choose standard report. Everybody's going to default to have 3 reports at the top. They typically are your accounts receivable aging. We're going to close this stuff that pops up, right? Because it drives me crazy. Our balance sheet and our profit and loss. The 2 reports that we're specifically going to look at once we've reconciled is our profit and loss and our balance sheet. And we're making sure that all that work that we were doing categorizing is accurate. We just did the reconciliation process so that we know that the values of all these items are correct. However, now we need to make sure that the categories are correct. So if I hit profit and loss, and I changed my report period to last month. So I hit the scroll down and I go to last month. It's automatically going to change the dates. Now we're going to pretend that my Amex really was through the end of the month and not the 10th, because that wouldn't be as accurate right now. Normally with your bank accounts, it's during that month, right? And then I'm going to look through at all of this and I'm going to make sure it's right. So, does my sales look right? Was it $11,000? I'm like, yeah, that was pretty good. Direct supplies, wow, I only had $78.64 in direct supplies. Is that really right? So this is where I start asking myself questions. Is this the expectation that I had? Maybe my repairs and maintenance is a little bit too high from what I expected, or maybe my office expenses are a little bit too high and it should have been direct supplies. Or I just see something that stands out. Now, the first time that you do this, I recommend you go through every single one of these and you confirm and verify what's in there. And what I mean by that is I just click the value over here to the right, and it will give me a transaction list then, or a transaction report of every item that's in here. This happened to actually only be one item that's in here. So now I look at that and go, okay, that was right. My mistake. If I look at my office expenses, though, and I say, I'm really not sure that it was supposed to be $334, I'm going to click those office expenses. And then I'm going to see all of these that are listed in here or lined up in here. And if I see something that I think is wrong, so this paper expense, let's say, oh, that really wasn't, that Amazon that I entered really wasn't paper. I click that value again and I open it up. And now I can come over here and I can change the category or the account that I have chosen. And so maybe for this one, it was advertising and marketing. I bought some t-shirts or something. It really wasn't paper. And then I can save and close. What this does is it's just going to move it to the correct account. Now, if I've reconciled something, so that was at a later date after that reconcile, you will get a warning here. You can change the category like I just showed you without affecting the reconciliation. What you cannot change is the bank account, and you cannot change the value. If you do that, then your reconciliation will throw off your beginning balance. You'll get all kinds of warnings the next time that you go to reconcile. But this is basic in how you review your reports. And as I mentioned, we will do this more in depth next class as well, because you'll see it once we start matching things. But this is the profit and loss. I would do the exact same thing for the balance sheet, and it's to go through these one by one. Once you've gone through these one by one, you've reconciled all of your accounts and you've looked at both of these reports, this is when I would consider, from my standpoint, if I were you, that they are the most accurate to the best of your ability, right? There might still be errors. You might have been categorizing something wrong, but at least from your perspective, this is where they are the most accurate. Then if you have an accountant or someone like that help you review them, they may say you've got some structural issues and things that you need to review as well. All right, I am now going to run through these questions for the last few minutes because it's the basic things that we were trying to hit today.
All right.
And let's
And
see
Christy,
what we have. Yes.
so do you need to be to something right at 2 o'clock?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Okay, great. Then if anybody does need to go, we are recording and answers will be available in that recording. Okay,
Yes.
Christy, speed round,
Yes.
the
Here we
list of
go.
questions, and there are a few in the chat as well.
Yes. Okay. So I'm looking at question and answers first. And so there's a couple questions about point of sale. I'm going to skip point of sale right now because that really didn't have anything to do with what we were talking about today. We will talk about point of sale again next time. So catch us in the next class. Hopefully I answer all those questions for you. If you wanted to flag create expenses for a specific project, how can you do that? Just a note in the memo, or is there another way? Depending on the subscription level that you have, there is one that is plus or advanced that includes something called projects. You can add a note in the memo. However, searching in the memos is not that easy of a way to do that. You're probably going to set up sub customers and sub vendors, which we'll talk a little bit about that next week, and how you would actually be able to utilize project type job costing things, I'm assuming is what you're talking about, and not have the plus version or the advanced version. However, if you do a lot of job costing and you want to be able to really look at a project, highly recommend. It's worth its weight in gold going up to plus, even though it's about $100, $120 a month for it. You can do full job costing under projects, and it's quite amazing. When should I start recording transactions in QuickBooks? It's my first time using it. If you have no specific purpose for going back in history, right? So you already filed your taxes. This time of year, a lot of people will start on the first of the year because that way you have a full year of data. You can also start at the beginning of whatever month that you're in. Just know you won't have transactions from April or prior, right? So we could start on May 1st. It's just a personal preference. Can you link more than one business in QuickBooks Online? Yes. However, there is very specific ways of doing that to keep things accurate. If you are not comfortable with maintaining kind of the categories as it is, I would not recommend having more than one in the same QuickBooks account because there is a lot of tools that you need to use. The best thing is to have the plus version and use what are called classes, which is more of an advanced user thing that we're not really talking about today. But QuickBooks, you should have separate accounts for QuickBooks. However, there is a way to do it. If my business is self-funded, I'm adding money to a category in QuickBooks at a later date, I need to pay myself. How do I categorize this transaction? Okay, so if you intend on paying yourself back for all of the money that you infuse into QuickBooks, you're actually going to call yourself a liability. So that's the account that you're going to use instead of equity. And what that means is that the liability account, you're funding the liability, right? So, or the liability is growing with each time that you deposit money into the business. And then you will be able to keep track of it in that liability account. And then when you pay yourself back, you're going to reduce the liability just like any other loan. So that's the appropriate way to handle that. Seeing a lot of duplicate categories like vehicle expenses, and vehicle repairs. Do I need all of them? No. This is why we went through that discussion with categories and the chart of accounts in the beginning. So much redundancy, especially when you start to get into the sub accounts that QuickBooks can add in there. Absolutely inactivate anything that's redundant and that you don't need, because you will thank yourself in the future. What I have seen is that you might spend so much time being detailed and going all those sub accounts, and then you turn it over to a bookkeeper or an accountant, and they may not use them at all. Or they may add a whole bunch of accounts in there and they may use them and you may not, right? So it is make your life easy and don't do that. Can you customize the account types? You cannot customize account types or detail types. Those are locked in. What you can customize is the name of any account. So that first box when we added it, or everything over to the left, you just edit it, rename the account, make sure the account type and detail are still appropriate, but those are locked as far as QuickBooks. Do I need to choose a vendor for a credit card payment? No. So when you pay the credit card, you're paying the liability itself, right? And it doesn't matter if you have a vendor in there or not. What happens if tax was charged? Shipping fee was charged. How is that allocated? So you might want to separate out tax, the amount of tax that you paid. You might want to separate out shipping, and you would split that transaction in order to have those. So you would need to have those specific accounts in your chart of accounts for taxes paid as well as shipping fees in order to be able to split that account, but that would be the appropriate way. For restaurants, how are tips handled? So tips are also a liability, right? We're just collecting them and we're repaying them. So just like we're withholding any other thing from anyone, so you're going to want a specific tips collected is usually the account name that someone would have in their chart of accounts. And then anytime that tips are coming in from those receipts, you want to make sure that they go into that account. Then when you pay them out, so if you're paying them out from payroll, or you're directly giving the money to the employees, however you handle that, you want to make sure you reduce that liability then and you don't call that an expense when you do that. Can invoices from received from a vendor be uploaded to QuickBooks, and will the split be automatic between cost of product, tax, or fee? No, nothing is automatic, at least in that form. But yes, you can upload bills. You could actually use one of those emails. You can forward them directly into QuickBooks. The AI will try to pull everything off there. So maybe it will be automated, but again, it's one of those things that you have to go in and you have to look at the bill and you have to double check it. Then you need to make sure that you pay that bill. So when the payment happens, it's actually tied to that bill. Otherwise, your accounts receivable will continue to inflate. Someone said, I use oxygen and propane to make my goods sold. Did they go under cost of goods sold or fuel? If they are directly resulting in the outcome of a sale, right? So if we're talking about manufacturing, and which it sounds like you are, that is considered to be a direct expense and you would put it under cost of goods sold. Then Craig says, to clarify, I mean paying off a company credit card from the company checking account. You still don't need to put the vendor. You just need to make sure that that payment is attached as the credit card liability payment, not as an expense. So when you connect that account, right, to say that it is for that liability account, that's how you know what it was for. How do I categorize income, bank lines, purchase packages for sessions that have not been taken versus a single class paid? I'm not exactly sure what you're asking there. If you could clarify that, Terry Ann. What happens if you reconcile prematurely before things have been categorized and posted? Can you re-reconcile? QuickBooks is actually going to give you a warning when you start to try to reconcile, and that's based on that statement date that you put in there. You'll get a box up at the top if you have items in your bank feed that are dated prior to whatever date that statement end date is, and it will tell you that it'll say, oops, it doesn't look like you're quite ready to reconcile. And that's what that means. No, to answer your question though, can I re-reconcile? Actually, unless QuickBooks has changed it, there has been some discussion. The only person that can undo a reconciliation is actually an accountant. Kind of a weird feature that they took away from users. So if you have an accountant connected to your QuickBooks, then they can undo a reconciliation for you. However, you can't undo it yourself. Very weird. Somebody was in bank register, system recorded deposit that's in undeposited funds. It was a deposit for a program I offered. There isn't a C next to it. How do I fix it? So system recorded deposit means you accepted a payment from someone, right? That's usually how that works, like QuickBooks payments. It is probably going to naturally default into undeposited funds. You then need to go into bank deposits. It's a step that we didn't talk about today. We will talk about it next week because it's part of that proactive accounting. You have to complete the bank deposit. That's all that means, is that the bank deposit itself hasn't been fully completed. And that's why there's not a C next to it. Or it's not matched back from the bank feed as well. Let's see, where else are we? If I manually added a transaction, will deleting it on the reconciliation totally delete it, or will also be excluded in the categorization session? Based on what I showed you, when I deleted that transaction, so when I clicked into the reconciliation, opened it up, went down to more and deleted it, you are deleting it fully from QuickBooks. And then I showed you that if it was part of the bank feed, it just comes back into the bank feed. So we had to exclude it. So if you are deleting it, you are deleting it from all. So be aware of that when you do that. Account categories can be customized. So the names of the accounts can be customized. You can add categories into your chart of accounts, more accounts, and you can customize those as well. What about uploading receipts for expenses? So that was the one that I said mentioned that. I'll catch that in next class since we are over time, but we will talk about uploading receipts and how do we attach those. If I manually added every single transaction and my bank also added the same transactions automatically, could I go to the bank register and bulk delete all the ones that I manually added? No. Unfortunately, bulk deleting does not exist. You have to do it one by one, and it can be a very painful process. So if you manually added everything and then you connect your bank and your bank has them all in there as well, this is where you should see the match. And so you're not going to individually categorize all of them. You are going to say that it's a match because it's finding it already in the register. So if they're in your bank feed and you haven't posted them manually into the register yet, you can still catch that without having to delete everything. Hopefully that helps. All right, I think I got through everything.
There are a few in the chat, if you don't mind getting to those too. Sorry. I mean, you've been
That's
amazing.
okay.
You just
I
blew
forgot
through
there
like
were
20
multiple.
questions.
Yeah.
So,
Let's
but a few
see.
in the chat.
Okay. For meals, which is 50%, which is 100%. So 100% is when it's directly related to the business. So this would be from like a client standpoint, right? Or you're buying meals for your employees. The IRS likes to get a little sketchy when you can't fully explain that it was business related. So even sometimes when it's for employees, your accountant may actually advise you just to call them all 50%. So definitely an account question for that one. Um, Little confused on cost of goods sold. I think it was a product that you sold, not purchased. So cost of goods sold is anything that's directly related to the outcome of the sale. So if you purchased a product, it's called cost of goods sold, and you resold it to someone, that is a cost of goods sold, right? If you purchase something and you're just using it in your regular business and you're not selling it to someone, right? So there's no resale purposes, that's an indirect expense and is probably an office expense or supplies that are related to that. Hopefully that helps with that. How do I categorize a sold piece of pottery? The act of selling it is actually income. So that's when you make the money of it. If you bought the piece of pottery, though, to sell it, that's cost of goods sold, the act of purchasing it. Then when you sell it, that's when you generate the income. Um, I've been winging it so far. Wow, that's amazing. Everybody does that. Just it's so common to be winging it because they just drop you right in there, right? Just go ahead and do it. Terminology is different. Is there a list somewhere that the terms actually mean? Where is it explained? Um, I wish I could say there was a really easy list of where these terms are, but generally it's when you're in there that you find it. I don't know if the document that I shared in the email last time, the kind of that QuickBooks beginner setup probably has a lot of the terms that are interwoven in that as well. Also why I try to mention them so many times when I'm talking. Someone said reconciliation just a bit more. How would it be off if you categorize them? Oh my gosh, so many ways that the reconciliation can be off. And this generally is the more items that you have feeding into this, more integrations you have. I showed you the quickest, easiest way, right? One bank account, one bank feed. I've done no human potential integration user errors that are going into that. So in theory, everything should be accurate. You guys already saw off the bat one extra transaction had jumped in there, right, because of the transaction date. So I had to go in and take that out. But overall, it should be that simple in theory. You start having invoices where you're collecting payments, you start having POS systems, you integrate any kind of apps in here. It's really where the transfers start coming into play that things can be inaccurate. If bank feeds, there are glitches that happen all the time in banks. We don't realize it because we don't have the visibility that you will start to have in here, where transactions are in there that shouldn't be or transactions are missing. I still can't figure out how transactions are on my bank statement, but they didn't actually come in through my bank feed. You would think it would work. But a lot of it has to do with those security measures that happen. So there are a lot of things that can go wrong in reconciling. Also, if you are proactively entering things and reactively entering things at the same time, which a lot of businesses are doing. You can get a lot of crossover where maybe you added something in QuickBooks, you didn't match it, so you re-added it through the bank feed, and then you've got a duplication. That happens a lot with those transfers and things that I mentioned. So lots of things can actually go sideways, and I try not to make it too daunting, but I can tell you it can be a process sometimes to unwind some of those things that happen. The more often that you are in there, though, and the more comfortable you are with using it, the less errors that you're going to start to see happen. Um, Let's see, we've got one more. It looks like opened an account for my business. You mentioned not to add the bank accounts. Do you recommend it now? Yes. So the reason that I said do not add the bank accounts at the very beginning when we were doing this is because you had yet to look at your chart of accounts and do that cleanup of inactivating accounts that you didn't need. What happens is QuickBooks will automatically have you connect bank accounts and it will start choosing accounts for you in the background with its AI, and you don't know what accounts it's choosing. And so you can't go back and easily inactivate some of those accounts from the chart of accounts. However, now that we have cleaned up our chart of accounts, you can connect your bank accounts and you can start to categorize and do all the things that I showed you today. And it looks like Jenny found a glossary of terms, which is amazing. Thank you.
Yes.
And that looks like I've got all the questions. Did I miss any?
Yeah, there was one that just popped up in the Q&A. Can I Can I trust QB to match correctly, or is it often wrong, like with the rules?
Yeah, I wouldn't trust it. And I always trust but verify when it comes up to QuickBooks. With the AI, it's getting better, but as we know, anything with AI, it's not always accurate. And really, it is those transfer parts when you've got a transfer from the same bank to the same bank. One of those might be personal, one of them might be business. It may not pick up on it. So that's where, if you know those last four digits of your accounts right off the top of your head, or you have them listed very easily, you can see that those transfers were accurate. So I'll just open it up, take a peek at it before I definitely post it or say match.
Fantastic.
Can we address negative AR next week? We'll talk a little bit about AR next week because we'll talk about invoicing. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Chrissy. That was an amazing
Welcome.
question lightning round right at the end there. So thank you. Fantastic presentation, fantastic question answering. We're grateful and excited to have you back. Same time next week. So same day, same
Yes.
time. And thank you so much, everyone, today for joining us. We will have a survey that will show on your screen as we shut down. We really appreciate getting feedback from you on today's session and other things with which we can help you education-wise here at the NYSBDC. All right,
Yes.
everyone, looking forward to next week. And you'll get a follow-up email with information, so look for that. And we'll also be posting on that home base page that you should have received in a previous follow-up email. That link will also be in this follow-up email. All right, I think that's everything for today. Thank you so much,
Yes.
everyone. Have a
Yes.
great rest of your day. Bye-bye,
Bye-bye.
all.